All right, back here on another edition of our college admissions project, and I am joined today by Franklin College's Associate Director of Admissions, Hayden Sigalski. Hayden, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, of course.
All right, so first of all, Franklin College, Franklin High School, Franklin College. A lot of people know where it is, but why don't you tell us a little bit about Franklin College and why people should consider attending Franklin?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I assume most students at least maybe know where Franklin College is. But Franklin is situated right in between I-65 and US 31. So it's kind of in a convenient location. We're a very small campus where everything kind of looks in, centralized on what's called Dame Mall. So all of your academic buildings and residence halls and student center all look in, which is really nice, kind of creates its own little bubble, if you will. But we're also right next to downtown Franklin, so it's kind of a nice walking distance for shops, coffee, things like that. We are just about 1,000 students total, which means your average class size is right around 15, which is a pretty comfortable number. It means your faculty will know your name, know who you are, know where you're from, probably know what athletic teams you might represent, what Greek life chapters you might represent. Really, truthfully, from the start of an admissions process until you graduate and well on after as an alum, Franklin is a pretty individualized place, pretty individualized process. And you'll see that in admissions, you'll see it in the classroom, and you'll see it even with the networking and alumni stuff that we do later on. We are primarily a residential campus, so most of our students are living on campus. However, obviously students who attend Franklin Community High School probably live pretty close. So technically, we do allow students to live with their parent or guardian if you live within 30 minutes of campus. So that is an option to kind of help break down maybe some of the room and board costs. That adds a little bit. But most of our students live on campus, and we are I'd say heavy on the athletic side as well. We have a lot of student athletes that represent 21 different NCAA Division III athletic teams.
Yeah. So as far as like a Franklin College student, what does Franklin College look for in a potential student?
That's a great question. So Franklin College, as I mentioned, we're a pretty individualized process from start to finish. So when a student applies to Franklin, we're going to be doing what's called a holistic approach, which means we're going to look at your classes. What was the academic rigor of your classes? Did you take AP? Did you take dual credit? Honors? Did you take more standard classes? Of course, we're making sure that you also meet the Indiana, in this case, Indiana Core 40, one of the pathways to graduate. And then once we kind of do a full look through of the transcript, we also want to look at test scores if they're provided. Franklin College is still test optional this year. And so while they aren't required, if you do want us to look at them as a part of your application, we will absolutely do that. But primarily it's going to be the GPA. We take weighted GPAs as well. Those classes that you took. And then depending on if you fill out an application through the common application or directly through our website, obviously there's a lot of different information we'll get from either one, whether it be extracurricular involvement, volunteer experiences, athletics, jobs, anything like that. So we really do a full look through of whatever is supplied or submitted. And this includes like personal statements, essays, letters of recommendation. To apply to Franklin solely, we just require a transcript and of course your actual application. However, we see a lot of students that do submit letters of recommendation and personal statements or essays just to kind of boost the quality, so to speak, of their application. But there's not a set requirement for that. As an admissions counselor, which in this case I would be the admissions counselor Franklin Community students would work with. Again, going back to being individualized, if I see a student who maybe submits their application with a GPA that is more on a not a questionable side, but maybe is a little lower than what we would normally see, I can make that recommendation like, hey, have you thought about submitting a letter of recommendation or an essay? So again, it's to help kind of that process. That's where you want to build a relationship with your admissions counselor so that we can kind of help guide. And of course, your guidance counselors too will probably be able to give you some input. But that's kind of what we look for as far as the application. We see a pretty wide range of GPAs. We have, students with 3.0s, we see students with 4.0s, and everywhere in between. Of course, we want to make sure that if you're coming to Franklin College, that you're academically prepared and that we're also setting you up for success once you're here, and that you can write and read at the level that's going to be expected, even as soon as you start your freshman year.
Is there any like specific GPA that you're looking at, or is it just like, is that again kind of the holistic approach for that?
Yeah, I would say more the holistic approach. Typically we want to see at least above a 2.8, but that I would say is on the more minimum side. Our range is definitely, I think, more in that 3.2 to 3.6 is kind of our sweet spot where we typically see students. But again, we have outliers, and of course that's why we do the holistic approach, so we can make sure that if you submit a 4.0, what classes did you take still? And if you're a 3.1, maybe you took a lot of AP classes, and that's why your GPA might be lower than a 4.0 student, for example. So,
okay. So as far as like any other schools or like, what are the schools you have within Franklin College, like the separate schools? I personally, my favorite is the Shirk Hall Journalism School.
yes.
That's where I spent a lot of time when I was on Franklin College's campus. But what are some other schools that you have, and are there separate admission standards or acceptance standards to get into those schools?
Sure. So Franklin is I guess a little bit unique in the sense that we don't technically have schools, except for obviously our specifically the Pulliam School of Journalism is a more specific school, but most of our programs are where you don't have to apply to get into them. So Franklin has several. Am I okay to go into kind of some of like our top programs?
Okay. Yeah.
So biology, business, chemistry, journalism, and then elementary education are kind of Franklin's 5 like flagship programs. And then the 2, what I'd call like front runners behind those would definitely be like psychology and exercise science. And so elementary education and exercise science are the 2 programs that not right out of the gate your freshman year you have to apply to, but more towards that end of your freshman year, getting into your sophomore year, you have to worry about kind of an admissions process for those majors. Specifically with elementary education, it's because there are certain licensure tests, obviously, that you have to take to be able to even be a accredited teacher upon graduation. And so there's some preliminary steps that go into that process. Your freshman year, you can still take that intro to education class, kind of dip your feet in it, make sure you like it. But then towards the end of your freshman year, you're going to have more of those conversations about taking those tests that you need to show kind of a base knowledge to be able to then go in and do your field experience as your sophomore year. Because those start as early as your immersive term, your sophomore year. And then exercise science is the other program that students do apply to. Their process, they kind of take it in cohorts. And then if you don't get in your first year, you can apply that second year again. But I always like to say, while it's very intimidating, of course, to apply to a program and consider like not getting in, our faculty, advisors, and professors in general do a really great job of helping those students reroute. So, if you're taking exercise science classes and maybe you don't get in your freshman year, that advisor that you're working with can talk to you about, okay, what are your other interests? What are things that are transferable that could still get you to a career where you want to be? And so it's not, that you don't get in and then you leave Franklin College. It's okay, let's reroute you. How can we get you connected to a different department where you still feel like you're interested and excited about learning these things, and it can get you to a career that you want to get to. I think in both of those programs, though, too, your faculty are working with you so individually and so closely that you'll be prepped for those processes once they start. And so I feel like most students kind of know where they are when they start that process and kind of what to expect. And as far as the other majors, you don't have to apply to them. I think, of course, if you are taking, you're thinking, oh, I want to be a math major, and you're taking several math classes and you're not doing well, I think those faculty members would probably talk to students about, okay, like what else are your interests? And that's why we have that career and professional development office too. So students who are uncertain about what they want to do can get some additional support in finding what's the best academic fit for them.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a great tool to have there. And
Mhm.
there's great people in there who've been there for a long time and can
Yes.
help out with time. Okay, so the last one, just financial aid or tuition. What is the cost to attend? And then just maybe the financial aid process.
Sure. So our financial aid process is still kind of being finalized. So as I mentioned, of course, if you're not living on campus, that does cut down your room and board cost because you don't have to have a meal plan. You won't be paying for the residential side of things. Every student obviously pays for tuition. However, what I always like to kind of start out with, because I feel like sometimes a sticker price is a little shocking initially, is that every student who applies to Franklin College is, and if they're admitted, of course, is assessed for an academic merit scholarship. And this year they went, or this past year, they went up to $20,000. So potentially you're, depending on your GPA and your rank, and if you submit those test scores, how your application looks holistically, you could be potentially knocking off a good portion of tuition. And then of course, beyond that, your admissions counselor, in this case me, would be working with you to find those additional scholarship opportunities that would continue to kind of chip away at that cost. And so it's whether it's, of course, working with guidance counselors and then, recommending, have you looked at the Johnson County Community Foundation? Have you looked at the College Board? We've even had students whose parents or guardians work somewhere and that employer offers a scholarship. And so it's kind of helping each student dig through that process. And in our financial aid offer, we also typically send out a scholarship guide. So it kind of references like credible websites to be looking for scholarships, because there are unfortunately some scams out there that you just have to be careful of and putting your information into. So we try to help guide students in that, just to make sure that when they get that initial number, it can be, I think, a little startling. But as you start to knock out that academic merit scholarship, as you start to apply outside community scholarships, it does dwindle down. And I tell students too, like, I think sometimes it's like, oh, I have to write all these essays for, a $500 scholarship. But if you get 4 $500 scholarships, like that adds up over time and over the semester. So it's definitely worth doing that work. And then some additional opportunities that Franklin College offers are our music, or generally fine arts, but music and theater, and then again, art in general scholarships. And those are all kind of varied amounts. Music and theater, you do an audition and you talk to those professors. And I think audition is probably a startling word initially, but it's more about a conversation. Of course, if you play an instrument, I'm sure that they're going to want to see you play your instrument, make sure that you can actually do it. But theater, it's even if you want to just work on the set, it's again anything that has direct involvement. What's really nice about theater specifically is that you don't have to be a theater major, as long as you're having involvement within the theater productions or you're taking some classes. Art and music are more specifically that you need to be in the programs, the majors. But theater is a little bit more loose in the sense that you just need to be involved. And then our last kind of scholarships I always like to touch on too are the alumni scholarship and then the sibling grant. So if you have a sibling who attends Franklin College currently, or if you attend Franklin College and then you have a sibling who comes along, if you're there at the same time, we do offer a sibling grant to kind of help alleviate some of that cost as well. And then the alumni grant would be any parent or guardian, direct family relative who has attended Franklin. We also offer an alumni scholarship. So it's another way just to kind of continue to break down the process. I guess I should have maybe started with this one because it can be a game changer. But we also have our Ben Franklin Scholars competition too that typically happens in December, early December. And so we offer typically, again, this is part of our process we haven't completely finalized, but we're hoping to still offer 2 full tuition scholarships, and that's dependent on how you do in this competition. It's more of an interview style, again in early December, but that's another game changer too. And for students who are admitted with distinction, you're invited to come to that day. So that's something to definitely keep in mind as you apply and keeping your grades up, just to make sure that you could potentially be a part of that competition.
Okay. All right. Well, Franklin College, a great option for any school or any student across the country, world,
Mhm.
really, but especially those who are right down the street. So once again, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Hayden
of course.
Stigalski, Associate Director of Admissions at Franklin College. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.